For years, the Texas killing fields held more questions than answers. 4 women whose bodies were found in the same stretch of land in League City, Texas. It was a pattern investigators couldn't ignore, and there was a suspect whose name kept resurfacing. In 2026, they returned to question him. Hours later, he was dead. But this story didn't end there, and it doesn't end with him. This is their story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we will be joined by guest reader Brianna Evigan.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
Vanessa, I am untraditionally going to just jump into our story today because I am eager to share this update with you.
Right, and you told me that it's an update on the Texas killing fields?
Yes, so this is a pretty major update, and I don't think that it's being talked about enough outside of Texas. It's not an update that I had known about, and so a little bit, a smidge of time has passed before now, so I'm just going to jump right in.
Sounds good.
In late March 2026, investigators arrived at a Houston area hospital room. In the bed was a man named Clyde Hedrick. The investigators were there to ask him some questions. Clyde was a familiar name to law enforcement. A former roofer and longtime local, he had been convicted in 2014 of involuntary manslaughter in the death of a woman named Ellen Beason. It was an old case, an old story that few in the area could forget. In July of 1984, 29-year-old Ellen Beason went to a bar called the Texas Moon. There was a fundraiser that night raising money for a local family. At some point, her friend Candy introduced Ellen to her ex-boyfriend, Clyde. Candy and her husband left early, leaving Ellen behind, seated at a table, talking with Clyde. It was the last time anyone remembers seeing her alive. A year later, Ellen's body was found underneath a discarded sofa near Old Causeway Road in Galveston, Texas. Clyde was a suspect in her death. Clyde said that after leaving the bar together, they had gone to a swimming hole. Ellen got into the water. He stayed on shore. Not long after, he claimed he found her floating, dead. He said he'd been driving her to the hospital when he panicked, abandoning her body where it would be later discovered. At the time, the county medical examiner ruled Ellen's cause of death as undetermined. Clyde was charged only with abuse of a corpse. He was convicted, sentenced to 1 year in jail, and fined. But in 2011, Ellen's body was exhumed. Investigators discovered a significant fracture to her skull, an injury that should have been noted in the original examination. Clyde was charged with murder, but ultimately convicted of only manslaughter. In 2014, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was released in 2021 and placed under supervision at a halfway house. And it was all of this behind him, this history, this pattern, that investigators walked into his hospital room. But they weren't there to talk about Ellen. Investigators were there to ask about 4 other women and teens: Heide Fye, Laura Miller, Donna Prudhomme, and Audrey Cook. All of them had been found murdered along a stretch of land off Calder Road in League City, Texas, a place that has become known as the Texas killing fields. Just hours after investigators left that hospital room, Clyde Hedrick passed away. He pulled out his own tracheostomy tube from his mouth, ending his life. This episode is an update, but it's also a return to the Texas killing fields and the women and girls whose lives were taken there.
Wow, so that seems like quite a move, pulling that tube out. I mean, Do we know what was said in that room before he did that?
We don't yet. So this is breaking news, essentially.
Okay.
Right? So we don't know exactly what was said to him, but we do know that the investigators were preparing to bring 4 indictments against him for the murders of all 4 women and girls.
Okay, because that just seems like kind of a desperate move right there, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we going to talk a little bit about, because I know we've talked quite a bit about the Texas killing fields in the past.
Yeah, so let's kind of set the stage for people who might be unfamiliar with this, because I don't want any of our new listeners to feel disconnected from what's happening here.
Right.
So the name Texas Killing Fields refers to a specific 25-acre stretch of land in League City, Texas. But over time, it has also come to describe a broader area along I-45 corridor between Houston and Galveston. And this is where more than 30 women and girls have been murdered or have gone missing. Vanessa, you know this, but we've covered stories from the Texas killing fields basically since the start of our podcast. That includes the disappearances of Shelley Sykes, Michelle Doherty, Tatran Harriman, and Suzanne Richardson. But the story that first drew me to the Texas killing fields was different. It was a story of two unidentified women known only as Jane Doe and Janet Doe, whose bodies were found in that original League City field off of Calder Road. I wrote a poem for them in my book Doe at the time when their names, their histories, and the details of their lives were still unknown. Then in 2019, they were identified. Jane Doe became Audrey Cook. Janet Doe became Donna Prudhomme. And we've covered their cases before, but at the time, there were a lot of unanswered questions about who Audrey and Donna were and about how they ended up there and about who had taken their lives. So if you have not listened to our earlier episodes, I'd encourage you to go back and start there for a fuller picture of this case. But today, we're returning with something new because, again, this is a major update in the stories of Audrey Cook and Donna Prudhomme.
So for our long-term listeners, like what would be the best way, and our new ones joining in now, to not miss updates like this in the future?
So definitely subscribing to She Goes by Jane wherever you get your podcast is a huge boost to make sure that you are keeping up to date on everything that we talk about here. And it also helps us to continue to tell these stories and continue to give these updates. Now, for years, this small stretch of land off of Calder Road in League City, Texas, has held a lot more questions than answers. It may have once been part of the region's larger cattle ranches, but by the time this story begins, Interstate 45, cutting between Houston and Galveston, ran straight through the area. Calder Road sits just to the west of it, and it's a narrow line running parallel to the highway. Nearby subdivisions began to take shape. These were homes for people who wanted distance from Houston's sprawl or from the constant churn of tourists along the coast. But even as the area grew, this 25-acre field remained untouched, and it was owned by a petrochemical company and left undeveloped. Then, as now, it's a landscape of scrub and trees, tall grass, standing water, pockets of land that really felt easy to step into and harder to see out from. In the 1980s, people said it felt cut off from everything else, isolated even with houses just streets away. And for a long time, it didn't have a name. It was just another empty field in a quiet Texas town, until it wasn't. By the 1980s, people began to call it something else, the killing fields.
Now, when it comes down to it, too, it's not like there's is there like a higher population or something that would lead to more instances of like people being murdered and ending up on this kind of isolated stretch? Or is it just because something is happening there?
Yeah, so specific to the Calder Road property, there's always been a lot of debate about what's happening to the
right, like why are those numbers
location.
So high, right?
Yeah, so we're going to kind of cover the history of that. So everyone's feeling a little like, what is even happening in this place? That's part of it. The broader killing fields, that bigger stretch along I-45, right? So many women and girls have gone missing. And this has led to a lot of debate. A lot of people wonder if there's like a single serial killer targeting women in this area. And on the other hand, you have people who are like, that's not what's happening at all, right?
Right.
I'm on the side of that's not what's happening at all. I'm on the side of there are potentially many predators targeting women in the same area. That's for a lot of reasons. People are in and out of the area, right? But also, I think it's just it happens in other locations that we've talked about on our podcast.
We've talked about like the Gilgo Beach and how that was multiple people doing multiple crimes and using the same piece of land.
Yes.
So that's essentially what's happening here too.
Yes. And so specific to the Calder Road property, where 4 women have been found, is that one person or is it a convenient location to leave bodies?
Right. And obviously some of them are clusters of the same person.
Yes.
Doing multiple crimes, but there's like an overlap of all these different people using the same piece of land.
Right. Like it's a, thought that it has occurred potentially to more than one person. So, it's easy to kind of be like, well, this, could be one person and kind of make that assumption. But as we saw in Gilgo Beach, I definitely thought that one of the victims was a victim of the serial killer. And I had made that assumption. And it turns out it was her ex-partner.
Who just happened to put her remains in the same spot that other people had been putting remains.
Yeah.
Which is just, it ends up being confusing, but also kind of covers up what that person did, right? Like, he wasn't actually like, suspected because he's using the spot that other people
are using.
So right away, everybody's assuming the same thing, right? Like, so it can get, I guess it can draw things out too and complicate a case.
So there's a lot of history in this specific Calder Road location. And I'm going to kind of give a summary of the cases. Now, it was Heide Fye who was found first. And I just want to say that some people call her Heidi, but her niece used Heide. So I'm assuming Heide is either her nickname or the correct pronunciation of her name.
Right.
On April 4th, 1984, a homeowner along Calder Road noticed something in her dog's mouth.
A dog.
It's always a dog.
It's always a dog. Or a mushroom hunter.
Right.
Or a hunter.
This time, her dog had a human skull. When police arrived, they began searching the area, extending into the nearby Humble oil field, just yards from the home. That's when they found her, the mostly skeletonized remains of a woman lying beneath a tree. Dental records would later confirm her identity, 25-year-old Heide Fye, who had been missing since the previous October. Heide, who had been working at the bar, the Texas Moon.
Didn't we just talk about the Texas Moon?
We did. So this is where Ellen Beason was last seen, and Heide worked there. And it's one of the strongest connections between Ellen and Heide.
Okay.
Ellen disappeared just a few months after Heide's body was found.
Okay, so they would not have been there, like, at the same time. I mean, they might have previously, but...
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But kind of, it's just months apart, kind of same ecosystem. Yes. Now, Heide had been staying with her parents while recovering from surgery. And on October 7th, 1983, she spent the day helping her father cut tree limbs in the yard. That afternoon, as he settled in to watch a baseball game, Heide told him she was going to hitch a ride to Houston to help her boyfriend. Her father offered to drive her. She said no. Instead, she walked to a nearby convenience store to use the payphone. The clerk working there would be the last person to see her alive. Her parents reported her missing to League City Police, but they were brushed off. Officers suggested it would be better to avoid media attention in her case.
Why would they say that?
Yeah, this is something, it's never been clearly explained why this brush off when it comes to her. At the time, her father couldn't understand it, and he began searching for her on his own. And decades later, her niece, Nina, still points to that moment as one of the most troubling unknowns in Heide's case. Why did this happen? Now, just months later, another girl would disappear from the same area, 16-year-old Laura Miller. Laura had just moved to League City with her family, and their phone hadn't been connected yet. So on September 10th, 1984, her mother dropped her off at the same convenience store, at the same payphone Heide had used. Laura called her boyfriend, Vernon. The two talked for a bit, but her mother encouraged her to end the call. She was on her lunch break, and she needed to get back to work. Laura wanted to stay on the line a little longer, so Laura told her to go ahead without her. Vernon would be the last person to speak with her. Later that evening, he showed up at the Miller home, expecting to see Laura. They had plans. Her parents thought she had been with him. They began calling hospitals. Laura had a seizure disorder stemming from a childhood illness, and they feared that she might have had an episode on her way home. No one had seen her. No one had admitted her to the hospital. Tim Miller tried to report his daughter missing, but League City Police suggested she had run away.
We never like it when that happens, right? Especially, she doesn't seem like she has a reason to run away. If she has a seizure disorder, she's talking to her boyfriend who's going to visit her. Why would you jump to that conclusion?
Right. So he even explains to them her medical condition, like how dangerous it would actually be for her to be without her medication. But despite this remained their theory. And he was like insisting that even if she had run away, even if that's true, she needed to be found because she needed this medication.
Right. And she's still a child. She's 16.
Exactly.
Okay.
But they still brushed off his concern. And week after week, he returned to the station. And week after week, he was dismissed. At one point, Tim asked officers to search the Calder Road field where Heide had been found just in case. They refused. They said that Heide's case had been an aberration. They described it as a sex thing and felt it wouldn't happen again in their small town.
Wouldn't a sex thing keep happening if somebody's doing that kind of crime?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This defies any logic.
Right.
Right. And that's why I think there's like a lot of unknown questions about what was happening at the time in this specific location.
I remember talking about this before and the lengths these dads went through to try to be heard.
Yeah, because like Heide's family before him, like Tim was left to search for his daughter on his own. Then on February 2nd, 1986, 2 dirt bike riders made a discovery. They found the body of a young woman laying face up just 50 yards from where Heide had been found. When police arrived, they searched the area and found another body, this one just 20 yards away. At a press conference, League City Police Chief Ron Wroblewski told reporters that they would be contacting state and national missing persons agencies to identify the victims. There were no local cases, he said, that appeared to match.
So that, to be clear now, there's 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Heide and then the 2 that were found in this moment.
The unidentified ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Tim Miller learned about the discovery from a Houston newspaper. It simply noted that 2 unidentified women had been found in a field not far from where Heide Fye had been found.
What a jarring thing as a dad to just
like
read in the paper when you think you've been communicating with the police on this.
Mm-hmm. And you pick up the paper and you see that just down the street they found bodies.
Yeah.
And no one's contacted you.
That's horrible.
So he contacted police and he asked if one of the victims could be his daughter. That's when he was told there was no active missing persons case for Laura. It had simply been noted that she had ran away.
So they knew that without a doubt, 100%, and they're just going to go with that?
So they were like, runaway, voluntary missing, and they had clearly not been looking for her, despite her dad showing up time after time to ask about his daughter. 3 days later, one of the victims found that February afternoon was identified as Laura Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Finding out that Laura was in the field that entire time filled Tim with rage. He'd later tell reporters that if the League City Police had listened to him from the start, quote, she would have been dead, but there would have been some damn evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the other woman found alongside Laura remained unidentified and unnamed, and she became known only as Jane Doe. Years passed. Then on September 8th, 1991, a group of horseback riders moving through the Calder Road property made another discovery, body of a woman. She was found just 100 yards from where the others had been located. Investigators believe that she had been beaten to death roughly a month earlier. But like Jane Doe, she could not be identified. She became known only as Janet Doe. As the years went on, it seemed increasingly likely that Jane Doe and Janet Doe would never be identified. No one had come forward recognizing either woman. But developments in 2018 radically changed that reality. In April of 2018, Joseph James DeAngelo, long known only as the Golden State Killer, was identified. That same month, Marcia Sosaman King, an unidentified murder victim known only as Buckskin Doe, was given her name back. Both used a new tool known as investigative genetic genealogy. There had been a boom in the personal DNA kit industry around the same time. People ordering kits from places like 23andMe and Ancestry in order to trace their heritage and connect with relatives. But researchers realized that it could be used for something else: identifying remains of unidentified persons and capturing criminals. Now, both 23andMe and Ancestry had restrictions on the use of their data by law enforcement, but there was a lot of data available on places like GEDmatch, where users could and still can upload their own DNA information to these sites. Sitting in Texas, FBI agent Richard Renison realized how powerful a tool this could be. Renison had worked as a League City police detective in the 1980s, making him well familiar with the cases of both Jane and Janet Doe. He wanted League City to take a look and asked them to use investigative genetic genealogy on the case. They refused.
For real?
Yeah.
Why would they refuse a tool like this?
So it is it's just starting out, right? And the kind of pushback that he recalls getting is that they were unfamiliar with this tool. They didn't know if they could trust it, if it would hold up, etc., etc.
But we have talked about cases where they use psychics.
Yes.
In the 70s and 80s?
Yeah.
So why would they not want to use, what year are we in now?
2018.
2018. Why would we not want to use something that's actually science-based?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, specifically Laura Miller's dad, Tim, he was
it's worth it, right?
Well, back in the day, he was actually, consulting psychics and anyone he could think of to find his information about his daughter's murder, right? So now that we have this, science-backed system that could be used, what are we not doing?
Right.
Now, over the next 18 months, he asked again and again, and he received the same answer, which was, again, no.
Huh. And this was an FBI agent actually proposing this? It wasn't even just, Tim doing it?
Yeah. So, because Tim, he has a long history with trying to deal with this.
Yes.
With law enforcement in this area.
Yes.
And he was probably used to getting told no.
But when it's an FBI agent
who had previously worked in your office, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing, right?
Right.
Finally, though, he learns they had actually attempted to use it on their own.
Huh. So they didn't use it through an agency?
So yes, they attempted to figure this out on their own. And he thinks it's because they maybe wanted the credit.
Okay. Instead of just hiring the people who know how to do it.
Right.
Okay.
They were unsuccessful. They hit roadblocks in trying to identify both women, likely because they might not have been fully versed in all of the options. Right?
Those people are probably quite trained in what they do.
Yes, the people who do it are amazing.
Right.
Now, finally, they are actually willing to ask for help.
Okay.
And once it was turned over to another agency, the identifications came with startling swiftness. They began with Janet Doe, and within 45 minutes, they had identified her as Donna Prudhomme, who had last been heard from, we believe, in 1989. The next day, they started on Jane Doe's case. Within an hour, she was identified as Audrey Cook. Audrey was last heard from in 1985. After all those years, it took less than 2 hours to identify both women.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Yeah.
Just 2 hours after so many years.
After so many years. And, Renison, the FBI agent, one of the frustrations he expressed is that if they had allowed this to happen 18 months previously, they might have found out more information, because Donna Prudhomme's boyfriend that she had at the time, he passed away a few months before they made the official identification.
So had they done it the 18 months prior, he would have still been alive?
And so they could have informed him, but also he might have known information about what was going on with Donna at the time.
It shows you how much time really does matter.
Exactly.
In these cases.
Yeah. So even though I'm sure everyone was cheering, we finally have their identifications, Renison was sitting there thinking, God, a few months difference, what that would have made.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a moment. Now, their names would, of course, change these cases, but it didn't bring justice to either woman. Now, the fact that Audrey Cook had gone unidentified for so long always bothered this man named Robert Valentine. He'd actually been one of the first to the scene the day Audrey and Laura were found in the field. He'd later say of Audrey, she was a very distinctive looking young lady, and I say that because I noticed right away was the gap between her teeth, and I thought someone must know this girl. And someone did. Still looking for Audrey Cook was one of her few surviving family members, her sister-in-law, Shirley. In our earlier episode on Audrey and Donna, not much information was released about who Audrey was. But now we know more thanks to an interview by the evidence room with Shirley. Audrey was born on November 25th, 1955 in Memphis, Tennessee. Shirley describes Audrey as a tomboy. As a child, she'd been happiest hanging out with her father and camping, fishing, and riding her dirt bike. But Audrey was also restless. She's called an adventurous spirit. She left Tennessee with her girlfriend and moved to California. They stayed there for a few years before moving to Texas around 1976. Texas wasn't easy on Audrey. She worked various jobs, including as a golf cart mechanic, as a mechanic for National Rent-A-Car. And despite what seemed like patchy, though regular employment, she often reached out to her mother for extra money. This is likely because Audrey both used and sold cocaine, her addiction outpacing her income. It even led to the end of her relationship. In December of 1985, Audrey called home asking for money. Her mother sent some via Western Union. The two of them had a system. If Audrey wanted money, she could call, but as soon as she received it, she needed to call her mom back and confirm that she'd picked it up, and that time she did. Later that week, she called her mother again. She asked for money for a second time. Her mother sent another payment, but Audrey never called back to confirm she'd received it. The last known contact with Audrey is December 17th, 1985. It's the date on a Western Union receipt.
So do we know if she ever picked up that last payment?
I believe she did. Yeah.
So something happened between there and confirming it with her mother?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, for a long time, Audrey's family believed that she would come home, though her lack of communication did cause conflict between her parents. Her mother wanted to go looking for her, and her father said that she would be home when she was ready.
Okay. I could see that causing a big conflict.
Right. Like one parent wanting to go look for her and one believing that Audrey's choosing to sort of distance herself from the family.
I know which one I would be. So it would be really frustrating to have somebody not wanting to help me look.
Right. Yeah. I think it's I think in many ways her dad probably thought he knew Audrey best though, because the two had been so close.
Well, he's probably giving her time.
Give her space.
And the mom was no.
Now, season passed with no word from Audrey. In 1987, her brother died from leukemia. Audrey had known he was sick, but after 1985, she never called back to check on him. And in 1987, she didn't come to his funeral.
So that would seem unusual.
Right.
Even if you don't have the best relationship or whatever.
That might have been a moment.
Right. That might have been the moment when you come back and just,
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, surely her sister-in-law began to dream up whole scenarios for what happened to Audrey. Maybe she left the country. Maybe she took someone else's identity. Maybe, just maybe, she was a Jane Doe somewhere. With the arrival of home internet, Shirley began spending countless hours scouring every place she could think of. She actually recalled in the interview talking about how she would go on her dial-up and just look for her for hours. And when Audrey's mother passed away in 2008, Shirley found some of Audrey's old letters. She searched every address Audrey had written from, and that's how Shirley found out that Audrey's former partner had separated from them over Audrey's drug use. But then the call she'd been waiting for and dreading for years came. That's when Shirley learned that Audrey had actually been a Jane Doe all those years. Her body found in the killing fields. It was like she had died at that moment, Shirley said, even though she'd been dead that long, and I'd been looking for her all that time.
So one of the things that always stays memorable and always really gets me with the Texas killing field stories, particularly Laura and Heide, was how determined their family members were to get them back. Because, that hasn't been the case in everything that we talk about.
Right.
It's not everybody has somebody looking that desperately for them. Mm-hmm. So to add Shirley to that list of these people, these family members trying desperately to get their people back, it's just, it adds to,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure you felt that when you were finding out exactly who Audrey was and this Shirley being this driving force behind her.
Yeah, like when we initially announced that or talked about Audrey being identified, not much had been released about her in particular. And now understanding that was because like so few of her family members were still alive. Like both of her parents had passed away. Her brother had passed away, right? And so hearing from Shirley herself, who...
And Shirley's her sister-in-law. Not all sister-in-laws would go out like this, out of their way. It's just...
So Shirley had known Audrey since Audrey was little because, she got married to her brother who was older and she'd watched her grow up. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, like hearing Shirley talk about it just really reaffirms like how loved Audrey was, even as Audrey was going through some very difficult moments of her life. Right.
Right. And I think people are quick to dismiss people when they're going through a difficult time. But like, it sounds like to Shirley, she was still such an important part of her life,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, the same is true for Donna Prudhomme, because her family was also waiting for answers. And like Audrey, she had seemed to slip off the face of the earth. Her calls had suddenly stopped coming in the late 1980s. Now, Donna had been born on April 23rd, 1957. She'd married her high school sweetheart, Daryl, as teenagers and had moved to Ville Platte, Louisiana, to be close to his family. The two had 2 sons. But though Donna loved Daryl, their relationship was volatile. Daryl was abusive, and Donna's sister, Diane, remembers one instance where Donna had been hospitalized with a broken eye socket. Eventually, Donna took the kids and left Daryl, moving the family to Austin, Texas. There, Donna struggled with substance abuse. Knowing her sons deserved better, she brought them to her in-laws. The plan was that she would focus on getting better, get her life back on track. In her last communication with her sister, Diane remembers Donna calling her and asking for her birth certificate. She planned to go on a trip to Mexico and needed it. Diane never heard from her again. For many years, she wondered if her sister had actually gone on vacation, taken off from Mexico, and decided to not return, or maybe something had happened to her while she was there. And just like Diane, Donna's sons were left without answers as well. But every direction, every lead Diane followed left her still without answers to give to them. Finally, she said she had to lay Donna to rest in her own mind for her own well-being because it hurt too much to keep wondering. But that 2019 call changed everything. Donna had never wanted to leave her loved ones. Her life had been taken from her. But like Heide's family, like Laura's family, like Audrey's family, Donna was left wondering what happened to her, who had taken her life and left her in that field. Over time, there has been no shortage of suspects in the murders of these 4 women. Over the years, suspicion moved in many different directions. A NASA engineer whose property bordered the Calder Road field, one of his employees who once claimed involvement in killing of Donna, other men, some known, some suspected, who had committed violence against women in the same region. But for Tim Miller, Laura's father, and for Joe Fye, Heide's father, one name stood out to them: Clyde Hedrick. Before his death, Joe spent years interviewing anyone he thought might know something about his daughter's disappearance. Then he would return home and record his thoughts into a handheld tape recorder. Again and again, one name surfaced in those recordings: Clyde.
So based on just the regularity of how that name showed up was kind of what had like Tim and Joe in that direction?
Well, so for Joe, it was like, this is a person who stands out to him. Mm-hmm. And part of that is because, one, Clyde had been a regular at the Texas Moon, which is where Heide had worked as a waitress.
Okay.
Right. And it's also where Ellen Beason had her last night. Mm-hmm. And Joe didn't believe he was telling the truth, that he wasn't involved in either Ellen or Heide's
When
cases.
Clyde was like, no,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now, Heide's niece, Nina, she shared that suspicion. At one point, she was shown a binder of photographs, which were possible persons of interest, and she picked Clyde out. I didn't even know who he was at the time, she said, but I knew I recognized him.
So she'd seen him before?
Yeah, so she remembered him coming to her aunt's apartment.
Okay.
And Clyde, of course, denied ever being there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in his recordings, Joe noted not only his own doubts, but he also said an investigator had privately expressed the same feeling, that Clyde wasn't being truthful about his involvement or knowledge of Heide, or Ellen for that matter. And Clyde's connections didn't end with Heide. He also had ties to Laura Miller.
Really?
Yeah. Now, just before the Miller family moved to League City, Clyde had lived only a few doors down from them in Dickinson, Texas. Witnesses who knew both Clyde and Laura later said they remembered seeing her riding on the back of his motorcycle.
So this is not random at all.
No. So you have this man who has intersected with two women whose bodies were found in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even Laura's boyfriend, Vernon, knew Clyde and knew who he was, and he described something about him was unsettling.
Did he say what?
Yeah, I'm sure he has over time, although what specifically, I don't know. But we also have like a 30-something-year-old man who's interacting with like a teenage girl.
And Vernon's obviously, he's a teenager too.
Yeah.
So he's just like you.
Yeah, putting her on the back of his motorcycle, etc., etc.
Okay.
Now, Laura's female friend said the same, that when they walked with Laura, she would sometimes take longer routes. That was just to avoid crossing paths with Clyde.
So Laura had feelings too.
Yeah, so she's avoiding him, he's making people uncomfortable, etc., etc. And there are possible connections to Donna Prudhomme as well. Donna's sister, Diane, had sent a picture of Clyde to one of Donna's sons, and he called her back within seconds of receiving this image. He recognized Clyde immediately. His face, his clothing, kind of how he carried himself. He said he had seen Clyde before during visits with his mother. Former FBI agent Renison, who again had previously worked with League City Police Department, later said, "We had a whiteboard with these names on it. One by one, they'd be crossed off, ruled out, but we could never rule out Clyde. Never." And still, despite these connections, despite the suspicions, investigators never brought charges against Clyde Hedrick in connection with the Calder Road murders. For decades, this case has really remained stalled until the fall of 2025. Laura Miller's father, Tim, never stopped pushing for justice for Laura, and he often recalled visiting the site on Calder Road where a cross had been erected in her memory and talking to her there. He would tell her he just didn't have the strength to go on to keep pushing for answers, but every time he'd walk away, he'd hear her voice asking him to keep going. By the fall of 2025, Laura Miller had been gone for 41 years, and in that time, Tim had formed Texas EquiSearch, which is an organization that helps search for missing persons on horseback. It's offered solace to countless families, someone who knew what they were experiencing, helping to search for their loved ones. But at the same time, he was keeping pressure on Laura's case. In that time, he maintained what he calls a bizarre and agonizing relationship with a man named James Dolphs Elmore Jr., who is now a 61-year-old man. At the time Laura went missing, James Elmore would have been around 19 or 20, I believe. He was also a longtime friend of Clyde Hedrick.
I'm curious about this relationship now.
Yes.
Like what's bizarre and agonizing?
Okay, so Tim says that in the time that he's known them, he has met with Elmore over 30 times and even accompanied him on drives out to Calder Road. And in those times, Elmore has said things to Tim about what has happened out on the killing fields.
Okay.
Tim told reporters, "I don't want to jeopardize this case, but there were times that I left Elmore and he told me some stuff. I just had to pull over and sob with the information I got. He reached out to me for reasons I don't know."
Do we know what those conversations were like?
We don't know yet the full specifics. We're going to get into a little bit why that is, but we do know that he has told Tim a lot.
Okay.
And it's with all these conversations in mind that Tim Miller visited the new district attorney, since he just started, I believe, last October, and begged him to take a new look at these cases, get a fresh set of eyes on them. And it wasn't a guarantee that they would. After all, in the years since Laura's murder, he'd often felt that law enforcement and legal teams just wanted him to walk away from this case. But this time, someone agreed with him, and it was time to look at the case again. Okay, so right now, this is still breaking news. It is still unfolding. In March, authorities shared that Clyde Hedrick had passed away in the hospital. He was simply described at that point in time as a longtime suspect in all of the Calder Road murders.
Okay.
So that's...
So the main suspect is gone.
Yes, so they kind of they said he's been a suspect. He was a longtime suspect. He's passed away.
Okay.
But on March 31st, authorities arrested his friend, James Elmore, the guy who's been talking to Tim.
Spending a ton of time with Tim.
Yes.
Okay.
He was charged with evidence tampering in Audrey Cook's murder and manslaughter and evidence tampering in the murder of Laura Miller. The few details released indicate that the manslaughter charge comes from the fact that Elmore gave Hedrick a vial of cocaine to administer to Laura.
Okay. So are we thinking now that he's not just a witness to these crimes, he's actually was working with?
So they've not charged him with murder.
Okay.
Right? But it's clear that he has some sort of active role in at least two of these cases.
Okay. So if anything, he was like supporting Hedrick in this. He wasn't just like this innocent bystander.
No.
Okay.
So it's when they make this announcement that Elmore was arrested that they also shared that his friend Clyde Hedrick was about to be indicted on all 4 murders when he passed away. That's of Heide Fye, Laura Miller, Audrey Cook, and Donna Prudhomme. He had taken his own life, it seems, to avoid facing those charges in court.
Mm-hmm.
So they were just about to do that.
Okay.
The evidence against both men has not been made public yet, but there has been an indication that there is indeed actual physical evidence linking both of them to these crimes, as well as statements from James Elmore. Galveston County District Attorney Kenneth Cusick said of this moment, due to the concerted efforts of law enforcement agencies in this county, this 40-year cycle of violence by these defendants against women, we're trying to make headway on it. I think we made significant headway yesterday in getting a charge against Mr. Elmore and having him arrested.
The horrible thing about this is he was directly, like, out of the 4 women, he's directly linked to Laura's murder.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim is the one who's been spending all the time with him.
Yes.
That's her dad is the one, like, firsthand.
Yes. So I'm imagining, although Tim is being necessarily tight-lipped about it,
well, yeah,
that some of the things that James Elmore has told him are about Laura's murder and what actually transpired that time.
I can't imagine being in that position.
No. And having to spend time with this man, listen to this man, and just walk away every time, right?
What choice does he have, though, if he wants to
get those answers, right?
Yeah, get those answers and get, like, some justice.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are still a lot of unknowns in this case, and likely more details will become available as James Elmore goes to trial. But for now, there's a certain amount of grief from the families that Clyde Hedrick escaped facing the repercussions of what he had done. Tim Miller said, "I think with everything that they had in the past, it's inexcusable that Clyde Hedrick had the opportunity to die without never being indicted, convicted." For Nina, Heidi's niece, she thinks of the efforts her grandfather put in to be heard, to have someone, anyone, care about Heidi's case as much as he did. And she thinks about the role he played in finding justice for Heidi all these years later.
It's really having, like, an impact, like, through generations now, because, like, Nina, this is becoming such a big part of her story as well.
Yeah, you know, in the cases that we cover, we sometimes hear from family members, right? And even in our cases that are decades old, you can see the generational weight this has. the things that people are carrying because of these crimes. Now, of Hedrick's suicide, Nina says, "It's sad that Clyde didn't get to pay for what he did. On the other hand, I'm glad that he doesn't breathe the same breath we breathe on Earth." It's unlikely this story will have any resolution soon. It's the unwavering belief from both Tim Miller and the new DA that this isn't the end of it. The DA said that they are actively following leads that he believes could bring justice to others involved in the decades of violence. Tim Miller said it more bluntly, stating, "If anybody thinks these girls are the only ones that were killed, you're living in a delusional damn world. We've got other girls to find. We're not going to break that promise."
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, The Killing Field, read by Brianna Evigan. Brianna has been on a quest to give a voice to the voiceless, shine a light on darkness, and create a positive impact. She co-founded Move Me Studio, a woman-led production company creating inspiring media that compels action. Brianna has a successful career in film, TV, music, and dance. Her first foray into Hollywood was everyone's favorite dance film, Step It Up 2, The Streets, and the reinstallment Step It Up 5, All In. Her TV career includes starring in From Dusk Till Dawn, Trooper, and Longmire.
The Killing Field. Unidentified woman, discovered September 8th, 1991, Calder Road, League City, Texas. I once held a raw oyster in my mouth, its three-chambered heart fluttering against my tongue. My tongue once knew 1,000 words, the shape of sound. That night before he plucked me from the sidewalk, I walked from the payphone, extra change slinking around my pockets. That night was magnolias, the air hemmed in by their scent. In the back of his van, I counted the ways out, the number of doors, the number of windows, all closed to me. The windows held the world, that other place. I scraped my knees, bled into the ground there in the lot. The lot was earth and oil, tin cans and rope. The heat of his body refracted off my skin, skimmed the trees in half-darkness. My skin, a mirror, reflecting moonlight and the sucked light of the stars. Still beneath a tree, my hands folded into a cross, the sign of prayer. My hands a dove. There my body lay fallow. There my body lay.
For more information about our show, please visit shegoesbyjanepodcast.com.
Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.